The metal floor of the prison ship was cold against Jake Morrison's legs. He sat with his back against the wall, watching the other prisoners around him. 300 humans were packed into this cargo hold like animals. The smell of sweat and fear filled the air. Jake looked down at his hands. They were the hands of a doctor, but now they were locked in metal chains. Just 6 months ago, these same hands had been saving lives in the medical bay of Kepler Station. Now he was a prisoner of war, heading to a place called Titan 7. The war was over. Humanity had lost. The aliens had won everything. Earth was under their control. Every human colony had fallen. The Zephyrian coalition had swept through human space like a storm, and now they were cleaning up the pieces. Jake remembered the day Kepler Station fell. He had been operating on a wounded soldier when the enemy ships appeared. The battle lasted only 3 hours. When the shooting stopped, Jake found himself staring at reptilian faces and clicking sounds that he slowly realized was their language. The Zephyrians were tall, covered in dark green scales, with yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. Their leader, a creature with silver markings on his head, had pointed at Jake and said something in their clicking language. Within minutes, Jake was in chains. That was 3 weeks ago. Now he sat on this prison ship with soldiers, pilots, engineers, and other medics. All of them were human. All of them were defeated. The ship shook as it moved through space. Jake could hear the alien guards talking in their clicking language outside the cargo hold. He had started to understand some of their words during the trip. They called humans deathbringers and berserkers. They seemed afraid of what humans might do, even as prisoners. Jake touched the metal collar around his neck. All the prisoners wore them. The aliens called them neural inhibitors. They were supposed to make humans less aggressive, less dangerous. The Zephyrians believed that humans had something they called an aggression gene that made them too violent, to live freely. But Jake was starting to feel strange. His head felt clearer than it had in weeks. The fuzzy feeling that had been in his brain since they put the collar on him was going away. He could think more clearly, remember things better. He looked around at the other prisoners. Many of them looked different too. Their eyes were sharper. Some of them were moving their shoulders and testing their muscles, as if they were waking up from a long sleep. Jake caught the eye of a woman sitting across from him. She was tall with short brown hair and the kind of posture that said, military, officer. Even in prison clothes, she looked like someone who used to give orders. Her name tag said Carter. Carter nodded at Jake, then looked meaningfully at her collar. Jake understood. She was feeling it too. The neural inhibitors were not working properly. Jake thought about what this meant. The aliens had built these devices to work on alien brains. But human brains were different. Human bioelectric patterns were not the same as Zephyrian or Kethavar patterns. The devices might work for a while, but they could not completely suppress human nature forever. A guard walked by the door. Jake could see his reptilian face through the small window. The guard was carrying a shock weapon and wearing thick armor. But Jake noticed something else. The guard looked nervous. His yellow eyes kept moving, watching the prisoners with fear. Jake began to understand. The aliens were afraid of humans even when they were prisoners. They had won the war, but they still feared what humans might do. That was why they were sending all the human prisoners to one place, far from civilization. The ship shook again, harder this time. Jake heard one of the guards clicking rapidly to another. They were approaching their destination. "Attention, prisoners," a voice said through speakers in the ceiling. The voice spoke in broken human language with a heavy alien accent. "We arrive at Titan 7 in 1 hour. You will follow all commands. Any resistance will be met with immediate punishment." Jake looked around the cargo hold. Many of the prisoners were now sitting up straighter. Their eyes were alert. Whatever the neural inhibitors were supposed to do, they were failing. The woman named Carter stood up slowly. A guard immediately appeared at the door, pointing his weapon at her. "Sit down." The guard clicked in his broken human speech. Carter sat down, but not before Jake saw her smile. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized she was not as trapped as she thought. Jake felt something stirring in his chest. It was not fear. It was not despair. It was something he had not felt since the day Kepler Station fell. It was hope. He began to think like a doctor again. He knew human anatomy better than any alien. He understood how human bodies worked, how they healed, how they could be hurt. The aliens might know how to build weapons and ships, but they did not really understand humans. Jake also began to think like a soldier. During the war, he had not just been a medic. He had fought alongside the troops he treated. He had learned to shoot, to move tactically, to think like a warrior. The aliens saw him as just a doctor, but he was more than that. The ship began to slow down. Through the small windows, Jake could see a gray planet covered in buildings and walls. Titan 7 looked like a prison world should look, cold, harsh, and far from anywhere. But Jake was no longer thinking about being a prisoner. He was thinking about being free. As the ship prepared to land, Jake made eye contact with Carter again. This time he also looked at other prisoners around the hold. He saw Pete Williams, a man with scarred hands who used to be a demolitions expert. He saw Lisa Chen, a pilot who had shot down 6 enemy ships before being captured. He saw dozens of other humans who had fought in the war. They were all starting to look more awake, more alert, more dangerous. The aliens thought they had won by capturing all the dangerous humans and putting them in one place, but Jake was beginning to realize they had made a mistake. They had not just put the dangerous humans in one place. They had put all the dangerous humans in the same place. The ship touched down with a heavy thud. Jake heard the aliens outside, preparing to move the prisoners. Guards were shouting orders in their clicking language. Weapons were being charged. Systems were being activated. Jake smiled to himself. The aliens were about to learn something important about humans. They were about to learn that humans were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. The cargo hold door began to open. Bright, artificial light flooded in. Jake stood up with the other prisoners, his chains rattling. But inside his head, he was already planning. The war might be over, but Jake Morrison was not finished fighting. None of them were. The aliens had made their first mistake by thinking they could defeat humanity. Now they were about to make their second mistake by thinking they could keep humanity imprisoned. Jake walked toward the door with the other prisoners. His medical training told him to help people and save lives. His combat training told him to fight and win. But his human nature told him to do both. He was going to escape from this prison. He was going to help his fellow humans escape. And he was going to show the galaxy that humanity was not defeated. The aliens called him a prisoner. Soon they would call him something else entirely. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison arrived at Titan 7. The prison world was even worse than he had imagined. Gray walls stretched for miles in every direction. Guard towers rose like metal trees, each one filled with alien soldiers watching, the prisoners below. Jake had become the unofficial doctor for Block 7, where over 1,000 humans were kept. The Zephyrian guards allowed this because they needed someone to keep the prisoners alive. Dead prisoners were useless, and the aliens did not want to waste their own medical staff on humans. What the guards did not know was that Jake was doing much more than treating sick prisoners. Every time he moved through the prison, he was learning. He studied the guard rotations. He memorized the layout of each block. Most importantly, he was removing the neural inhibitors from other prisoners one by one. The process was delicate. Jake had to be careful not to let the guards notice. He would wait until a prisoner came to him with a real injury, then he would secretly disable their collar while treating them. He told each freed prisoner to act normal, to keep pretending the inhibitor was working. Jake had learned that the collars worked by sending electrical signals into the human brain. But human brains were more complex than the aliens understood. The signals that were supposed to make humans peaceful were actually causing damage to important brain functions. Many prisoners were getting sick from the devices. Jake had also discovered something else. The neural inhibitors were designed for Zephyrian brain patterns. Humans had different electrical activity in their brains. After several months, the human brain would start to fight back against the foreign signals. This was why Jake and others had started feeling clearer. Captain Lisa Carter had been one of the first prisoners Jake freed. She now helped him coordinate with the military personnel in other blocks. Through a system of hand signals and coded messages, they were building a network throughout the prison. Pete Williams, the demolitions expert, had been teaching other prisoners how to make weapons from prison materials. Eating utensils could become knives. Cleaning chemicals could become explosives. Bed sheets could become ropes. The aliens thought they had taken away all the dangerous items, but humans could make anything dangerous. Jake moved through the prison corridors carrying his medical bag. To the guards, he looked like a harmless doctor going to treat sick prisoners. But inside his bag, along with medical supplies, were tools for removing neural inhibitors and messages for the resistance network. The prison was divided into 12 blocks, each holding between 800 and 1,500 humans. Jake had managed to visit 10 of the blocks under the pretense of medical emergencies. In each block, he had found leaders and begun building the resistance. Block 3 was run by Commander Sarah Hayes, a former naval officer who had lost her ship defending the Mars colonies. Block 5 was controlled by Sergeant Mike Torres, a Special Forces soldier who had been captured during the final battle for Earth. Each block now had its own cell of freed prisoners, waiting for the signal to act. Jake had been studying the aliens as carefully as he studied the prison. The Zephyrians had several weaknesses that they did not realize humans could exploit. Their eyesight was poor in bright light. Their hearing was sensitive to high-pitched sounds. Most importantly, their immune systems were different from human immune systems. During his medical work, Jake had collected samples of Zephyrian blood and tissue. He studied these samples in secret, using equipment he had slowly stolen from the prison medical bay. What he discovered changed everything. Humans carried viruses and bacteria that were harmless to them but could be deadly to aliens. The common cold virus, which barely made humans sick, could kill a Zephyrian in days. The aliens did not know, this because they had never been exposed to human diseases before the war. Jake began to develop a plan. It was risky and dangerous, but it might be their only chance to escape. He needed to create a biological weapon from human germs, something that would make the guards sick, but leave the prisoners healthy. The opportunity came when a supply ship arrived at Titan 7. The ship brought food, medical supplies, and new equipment for the guards. It also brought something Jake had been waiting for: fresh alien personnel who had never been exposed to human germs. Jake had been preparing for weeks. He had collected samples from prisoners who had colds and other minor illnesses. Using stolen lab equipment, he had concentrated these viruses and bacteria into a powerful mixture. The alien immune system would not be able to fight it. On the day of the supply delivery, Jake volunteered to help unload medical supplies. This gave him access to the prison's air circulation system. While the guards were distracted by the new arrivals, Jake introduced his biological weapon into the air vents. The effects were not immediate. It took 12 hours for the first guards to start feeling sick. By the second day, half the alien staff was too ill to work. By the third day, the guards were dying. The Zephyrians did not understand what was happening. They thought it might be some kind of alien plague that had somehow reached Titan 7. They never suspected that the harmless human prisoners were the source of the disease. As the guards became weaker, the prisoners became stronger. Jake and his network began the final phase of their plan. Block by block, they overwhelmed the sick guards and seized control of entire sections of the prison. Jake found himself leading the attack on the medical center. His knowledge of anatomy made him deadly in close combat. He knew exactly where to strike to disable an enemy without killing them. The guards were too sick to fight effectively, and Jake's team captured the facility within an hour. Lisa Carter led the assault on the armory. Her military training and the element of surprise allowed her team to capture weapons and equipment. Pete Williams took control of the prison's power systems, shutting down the security systems and opening locked doors throughout the facility. Within 3 days, the prisoners controlled 8 of the 12 blocks. The remaining guards had locked themselves in the command center and were calling for help. But help was far away, and the guards were getting sicker every day. Jake stood in the medical center, now converted into a command post for the rebellion. Around him, freed prisoners were planning their next moves. Some wanted to steal ships and escape into space. Others wanted to turn Titan VII into a fortress and fight the aliens from there. But Jake had a different idea. The galaxy thought humanity was defeated. The aliens believed they had destroyed human civilization. Jake wanted to show them they were wrong. "We are not just going to escape," Jake told the assembled prisoners. "We are going to make them remember why they were afraid of us in the first place." Lisa Carter nodded in agreement. "What do you have in mind, Doc?" Jake looked at the map of the prison complex. Then he looked at the captured alien equipment and weapons. Finally, he looked at the faces of 300 humans who had been beaten but not broken. "We are going to take their ship," Jake said. "We are going to take their weapons, and we are going to remind the galaxy that the war is not over." Pete Williams grinned. "I like the sound of that. When do we start?" Jake smiled back. It was not the smile of a doctor anymore. It was the smile of a warrior who had found his cause. "We start now," Jake said, "and we do not stop until every human in the galaxy is free." The outbreak at Titan VII was just the beginning. Jake Morrison was no longer just a prisoner trying to escape. He was becoming something the aliens had never seen before, a human who could heal and kill with equal skill, leading a rebellion that would change the galaxy forever. The escape from Titan VII made Jake Morrison famous across the galaxy. Every news channel showed the same security footage over and over again. Jake moving through smoke-filled corridors, treating wounded humans with one hand while shooting alien guards with the other. Jake performing surgery in the middle of a firefight. Jake leading 50 prisoners onto a captured Zephyrian cruiser as explosions lit up the sky behind them. The aliens had never seen anything like it. They called him the Death Healer and put the biggest reward in galactic history on his head. Every bounty hunter, mercenary, and military unit in known space was looking for Jake Morrison and his crew. But Jake was not hiding. He was hunting. The stolen Zephyrian cruiser had been renamed the Human's Revenge. It was not the biggest ship in space, but Jake and his crew had made it into something special. The medical bay had been expanded and turned into both a hospital and a command center. The weapons had been upgraded with human engineering. Most importantly, the crew fought with a combination of tactics that no alien force had ever faced. Jake served as both the ship's doctor and its most dangerous fighter. When they boarded enemy ships, Jake would lead the assault team while also keeping his people alive. He knew exactly how to hurt aliens without killing them, leaving them conscious to tell others what they had seen. The galaxy was learning to fear this new kind of human warfare. Traditional military thinking said that medics stayed behind the lines and fighters did the fighting. But Jake did both jobs at the same time, and he was better at each job because he did the other one too. Captain Ben Hughes was the alien officer assigned to hunt down Jake's ship. Hughes was a HFY warrior, one of the reptilian aliens who served as the military leaders of the Zephyrian coalition. He was experienced, smart, and had never lost a battle in 30 years of service. Hughes thought catching one human ship would be easy. He was wrong. The first time Hughes found the Human's Revenge, Jake was ready for him. The human ship was faster and more maneuverable than Hughes expected. When Hughes tried to board it, Jake's crew fought like nothing the aliens had ever seen. They moved through the ship's corridors like they knew every inch of it. They worked together without needing to talk. Most strange of all, their medic was also their best fighter. Hughes lost half his boarding party in that first encounter. Survivors told stories that sounded impossible. They said the human doctor had disabled 6 HFY soldiers without killing any of them, then performed surgery on a wounded human while enemy fire was hitting all around him. The second battle was even worse for Hughes. Jake had studied the recordings from their first fight and learned how HFY soldiers moved and fought. When Hughes tried a different approach, Jake was ready for that too. This time, Hughes lost his entire escort fleet. By the third battle, Hughes was starting to understand what he was facing. Jake Morrison was not just an escaped prisoner. He was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. He was a warrior who fought to save lives instead of taking them. But that made him more dangerous, not less dangerous. Jake's reputation was spreading across the galaxy faster than Hughes could chase him. Every time the humans' revenge raided an alien convoy or freed human prisoners from another world, the story got bigger. Humans on occupied planets heard about the ship where their people fought back. Alien soldiers heard about the human doctor who could kill them in ways they never knew were possible. The raids were carefully planned. Jake would study each target for weeks before attacking. He learned which ships carried supplies, which ones carried weapons, and which ones carried prisoners. His medical knowledge helped him understand alien biology, so he knew exactly how to fight each different species. When they attacked supply convoys, Jake's crew would board the ships and take what they needed: food, medicine, weapons, equipment. But they never killed the alien crews unless they had to. Jake would treat the wounded aliens after the battle, showing them that humans could be merciful as well as dangerous. When they found ships carrying human prisoners, the raids were different. Jake and his crew would fight with controlled fury, disabling alien guards and freeing their people. These rescue missions were the most dangerous, but also the most important. Every human they saved was another person who could fight back. Chantio, freed prisoners had a choice. They could be dropped off on neutral worlds where they would be safe, or they could join Jake's crew. Many chose to stay and fight. The humans' revenge was getting bigger, both in crew size and in reputation. Jake's medical bay had become legendary. Wounded humans from across the galaxy knew that if they could reach Jake Morrison, he would save their lives. But wounded aliens also learned that Jake would treat them fairly, even if they were enemies. This confused many alien commanders who could not understand why their enemy would heal their soldiers. Hughes was getting desperate. His superiors were demanding results. The humans' revenge had inspired copycat attacks across the galaxy. Other groups of humans were starting to fight back using Jake's tactics and methods. What had started as one escaped prisoner was becoming a galaxy-wide rebellion. The breakthrough came when Hughes realized he was thinking about the problem wrong. He had been trying to catch Jake like he would catch any other criminal or rebel. But Jake was not like other criminals. He was a doctor who had become a warrior, and that meant he would always try to save lives, even enemy lives. Hughes set a trap. He used one of his own ships as bait, filling it with wounded alien soldiers and sending out a distress call. He knew that Jake would not be able to ignore wounded people even if they were enemies. The plan worked. The humans' revenge appeared and boarded the damaged ship. Jake and his medical team went to work treating the wounded aliens just as Hughes had predicted. But Hughes had underestimated Jake's tactical skills. Jake had suspected a trap, but he had come anyway because people needed help. However, he had brought his entire crew and prepared for a fight. When Hughes's main fleet appeared, Jake was ready. The battle that followed became famous across the galaxy. Jake fought on 2 levels at the same time. He commanded his ship in space combat while also treating wounded crew members in the medical bay. He gave tactical orders while performing surgery. He coordinated boarding actions while keeping his people alive. Hughes had brought his best ships and his most experienced crews. But Jake had something Hughes did not understand. Jake's crew was not just fighting for victory. They were fighting for each other, and their doctor would not let them die. In the end, Hughes's trap became Jake's victory. The humans' revenge not only escaped but captured 2 of Hughes's ships and freed over 300 human prisoners. Hughes himself was badly wounded in the fighting and had to be rescued by his own crew. As Hughes recovered in his medical bay, he began to understand what made Jake Morrison so dangerous. The human doctor did not fight like other warriors. He fought like someone who believed that every life was worth saving, including the lives of his enemies. This made Jake unpredictable in ways that Hughes had never encountered. Most warriors became less effective when they tried to avoid killing. But Jake became more effective because his medical knowledge made him better at disabling enemies without permanent harm. Hughes wrote a report to his superiors that became required reading. In military academies across the galaxy, in it he explained that humans like Jake Morrison represented a new kind of warfare. They were not just soldiers or doctors. They were something entirely different, and the galaxy was not prepared to fight them. The hunt for the humans' revenge continued, but now every alien commander knew they were chasing something they did not understand. Jake Morrison had changed from hunted to hunter, and the galaxy was learning to fear the human who healed by fighting and fought by healing. Jake Morrison had become the most wanted human in the galaxy. His face was on every wanted poster from the core worlds to the outer rim. The bounty on his head was so large that entire fleets were hunting him. But Jake was no longer running. He was fighting a war. The humans' revenge now led a small fleet of captured alien ships. Over 2,000 humans served under Jake's command, rescued from prisons and slave camps across the galaxy. Each ship in his fleet served as both a warship and a mobile hospital. Jake had created something the galaxy had never seen before, a medical fleet that could fight. But the aliens were tired of losing. The Zephyrian Coalition had assembled the largest military force in galactic history to hunt down Jake and his fleet. Over 200 warships from 12 different alien species were coming for him. Leading them was Admiral Vexistar, the greatest military mind the Zephyrian Empire had ever produced. Admiral Vexistar was different from Captain Hughes. Where Hughes had been a soldier, Vexistar was a genius of warfare. He had studied every battle Jake had fought. He knew Jake's tactics, his methods, his weaknesses. Vexistar had spent months preparing for this moment. The trap was perfect. Vexistar had driven Jake's fleet into the neutron fields, a region of space filled with dangerous radiation and gravitational anomalies. Ships could hide in the fields, but they could not escape easily. Jake was cornered with nowhere to run. Jake stood on the bridge of the humans' revenge, looking at the sensor readings. 200 alien ships surrounded his small fleet. His own force had only 15 ships, and most of them were damaged from recent battles. By every military calculation, this should be the end. But Jake had learned something important during his time as a fugitive. Numbers did not always decide battles. Sometimes the side that was willing to sacrifice more would win. And Jake's people were fighting for something the aliens could not understand. "Dr. Morrison," said Commander Lisa Carter, who now served as his second-in-command. "We are outnumbered 15-1. Maybe we should consider surrender." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These were humans who had been prisoners, slaves, and refugees. They had followed him because he had given them hope. Now he had to decide whether to lead them into a hopeless battle or surrender them back to alien captivity. "No surrender," Jake said quietly. "We knew this day would come. We fight." The battle began at dawn, ship time. Vexistar's fleet attacked from all directions, trying to overwhelm Jake's smaller force quickly. But Jake had prepared for this. His ships did not fight like a normal fleet. They fought like a medical team. Each ship in Jake's fleet had a specific role, just like organs in a body. Some ships provided cover while others moved to help damaged vessels. The humans' revenge served as the brain, coordinating everything, while also serving as a mobile hospital for the entire fleet. Jake commanded the battle from his medical bay. He had screens showing the space battle around him, but he was also performing surgery on wounded crew members. His hands moved between tactical controls and medical instruments. He gave orders to his fleet while keeping his people alive. So, aliens had never seen anything like it. Most fleet commanders stayed safely in their command centers during battle. But Jake was in the most dangerous part of his ship, saving lives while directing the fight. His crew fought harder because they knew their doctor would not let them die. For 6 hours, the battle raged through the neutron fields. Jake's ships used the dangerous environment to their advantage, hiding behind radiation storms and using gravitational fields to slingshot around enemy formations. They were outnumbered, but they knew the terrain better. Admiral Vexistar watched the battle with growing frustration. His superior numbers should have ended this quickly, but every time his ships damaged one of Jake's vessels, the human fleet would reorganize to protect it. They fought like a single organism instead of separate ships. The turning point came when the humans' revenge itself took heavy damage. An alien missile broke through the shields and tore open the medical bay where Jake was working. Alarms screamed as air rushed out through the hole in the hull. Jake's crew expected him to retreat to a safer part of the ship. Instead, he sealed himself and his patients in the damaged medical bay and continued working. Through the hole in the hull, he could see the space battle raging around them. Enemy ships fired at his vessel while he operated on wounded humans, the Dao, sight of their doctor refusing to abandon his patients. Even with death all around him, drove Jake's crew to fight harder than ever before. They knew that if Jake would not give up on them, they could not give up on him. But the battle was taking its toll. Jake's fleet was losing ships and running out of ammunition. Admiral Vextar's forces were closing in for the final attack. It looked like the end for the humans. Then Vextar made a decision that changed everything. Instead of finishing Jake's fleet from a distance, the Admiral decided to board the humans' revenge personally. He wanted to capture Jake Morrison alive and end the human rebellion once and for all. Vextar's boarding ship attached to the humans' revenge, while the space battle continued around them. The Admiral led a team of his best warriors into the damaged human vessel. They fought their way through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lights, heading for the medical bay where Jake was trapped. Jake heard them coming. He finished, treating his last patient, and picked up his medical bag. Inside the bag were his surgical tools, but Jake had learned to use these tools for more than healing. In the hands of someone who understood anatomy, medical instruments could be very dangerous weapons. The final confrontation took place in the damaged medical bay. Admiral Vextar entered the room expecting to find a cornered doctor. Instead, he found Jake Morrison standing calmly among his patients, holding a surgical laser in one hand and a trauma kit in the other. "Surrender, human," Vextar said in perfect human speech. "Your fleet is finished. Your rebellion ends here." Jake looked at the alien admiral. Vextar was tall and powerful, covered in blue-gray scales and wearing advanced armor. Behind him were 6 elite Zephyrian warriors. Jake was alone, tired and surrounded. "You're right," Jake said. "This is where it ends, but not the way you think." The fight that followed became legendary. Jake used his medical knowledge of Zephyrian anatomy to target Vextar's weak points. He moved through the medical bay like it was an operating room, using every piece of equipment as either a tool or a weapon. Vextar was a skilled warrior, but he had never fought someone like Jake. The human doctor fought with precision instead of fury, targeting nerve clusters and pressure points that would disable rather than kill. Each strike was calculated to cause maximum effect with minimum permanent damage. The battle ended when Jake managed to inject Vextar with a paralytic drug he had prepared for Zephyrian physiology. The Admiral collapsed, unable to move but still conscious. His warriors moved to help him, but Jake stopped them. "He's dying," Jake said, kneeling beside the fallen Admiral. "The drug is reacting badly with his system. I can save him, but only if you let me work." The Zephyrian warriors faced an impossible choice. Their Admiral was dying, but the only person who could save him was their enemy. They watched in amazement as Jake began emergency surgery on Vextar, using his medical skills to counteract the very drug he had used to defeat him. For 2 hours, Jake worked to save Vextar's life while the space battle raged outside. He used techniques that combined human and alien medical knowledge, adapting his skills to treat a species he had been fighting against. When Jake finally stepped back, Admiral Vextar was breathing normally. The paralytic drug had been neutralized, and the Admiral's life was no longer in danger. Jake had defeated his greatest enemy and then saved his life. Vextar looked up at Jake with new understanding. In Zephyrian culture, a warrior who saved the life of a defeated enemy was showing the highest form of honor. Jake had not just won the battle, he had won Vextar's respect. "Why?" Vextar asked weakly. "Why save me?" Jake packed his medical supplies back into his bag. "Because that's what doctors do," he said simply. "We save lives, even enemy lives." Admiral Vextar made a decision that shocked the entire galaxy. He ordered his fleet to stop fighting and declared that Jake Morrison had proven himself worthy of respect rather than destruction. The battle ended not with human defeat, but with alien recognition of human honor. The news spread across the galaxy in hours. The great Admiral Vextar, defeated by a human doctor who then saved his life, had called for an end to the hunt for Jake Morrison. The human rebellion had won its greatest victory not through superior firepower, but through an act of mercy that no alien commander could understand or ignore. 5 years had passed since the battle in the neutron fields. Jake Morrison was no longer a fugitive running from alien hunters. He was Dr. Jake Morrison, the most respected medical officer in the galaxy and the most famous human alive. He died. Old Human's revenge had been rebuilt and expanded into something magnificent. What was once a stolen prison ship was now the largest mobile hospital in known space. The ship traveled from world to world, helping anyone who needed medical care. Alien and human patients lay side by side in the medical bays, treated with equal skill and care. Jake stood in his office aboard the ship, looking out at the stars through a large window. On his desk were reports from dozens of worlds where his medical teams were working. Human doctors and alien healers worked together, sharing knowledge and saving lives. The galaxy had changed. The war between humans and aliens was over, not because one side had defeated the other, but because both sides had learned something new. Admiral Vexitar had kept his word. After Jake saved his life, Vexitar had convinced the Zephyrian coalition that humans deserved respect instead of imprisonment. It had not been easy. Many aliens still feared humans and their capacity for violence. Many humans still hated the aliens, who had conquered their worlds. But Jake and Vexitar had worked together to build something better than war. The Galactic Medical Council now included humans for the first time in history. Jake served as the head of emergency medical services for the entire galaxy. When disasters struck, when wars broke out, when plagues threatened entire worlds, Jake and his teams were the first to respond. Jake's methods had revolutionized medicine across the galaxy. He had proven that the best doctors were not just healers, but warriors who fought disease and death with the same intensity that soldiers fought enemies. His medical teams were trained in combat as well as healing, able to work in the most dangerous situations. The door to Jake's office opened, and Admiral Vexitar entered. The Zephyrian leader now served as Jake's co-commander, helping to coordinate medical responses across alien space. The two former enemies had become close friends and trusted partners. "Jake," Vexitar said, his voice carrying the clicking accent of his species. "We have a problem. The long-range sensors have detected ships approaching from outside our galaxy." Jake turned from the window. "How many ships?" "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. They're coming from the Andromeda galaxy and they're moving fast. Our analysts think they're hostile." Jake felt a familiar sensation in his chest. It was the same feeling he had experienced in the prison on Titan 7, the same feeling that had driven him to fight for freedom. It was the knowledge that people were in danger and needed help. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. 6 months, maybe. Less. The alien fleets are already mobilizing, but these Andromedans have technology we've never seen before. Our military commanders are worried." Jake nodded slowly. He had hoped that his fighting days were over, that he could spend the rest of his life healing instead of hurting. But sometimes doctors had to fight to protect their patients. "Send a message to all medical stations," Jake said. "Recall all teams to their home bases. Start emergency medical preparations on every world. If there's going to be a war, we need to be ready to save lives." Vexitar hesitated. "Jake, there's something else. The Andromedan advanced scouts have been capturing prisoners and studying them. According to the reports, they're especially interested in humans. They seem to know about your reputation." Jake smiled grimly. "Good. Maybe that will make them think twice about attacking." Over the next few months, Jake worked harder than he ever had before. He coordinated the transformation of hundreds of medical stations into emergency hospitals. He trained thousands of doctors and nurses in combat medicine. He prepared the galaxy for a war that nobody wanted, but everybody feared. The Andromedans arrived exactly when Vexitar had predicted. Their ships were massive and strange, built with technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics. They attacked without warning, without negotiation, without mercy. The first battles were disasters for the galaxy's defenders. Andromedan weapons tore through alien shields like they were made of paper. Their soldiers fought with cold efficiency, showing no emotion and taking no prisoners. Entire star systems fell in days, but then something unexpected happened. Andromedan troops began surrendering without fighting. Jake was treating wounded soldiers on a border world when the first reports came in. An entire Andromedan battalion had laid down their weapons when they saw Jake Morrison's medical symbol on a hospital ship. They had heard stories about the human doctor who could heal and kill with equal skill, and they were afraid to face him. The news spread quickly. Jake Morrison had become a legend not just in his own galaxy, but in Andromeda as well. Stories of his escape from Titan VII, his battles with alien fleets, and his mercy toward defeated enemies had traveled across the void between galaxies. Jake realized that his reputation could be a weapon more powerful than any gun. He began moving to the front lines of the war, not to fight, but to be seen. Wherever Jake Morrison went, Andromedan forces would retreat or surrender rather than face the legendary human combat medic. The war that was supposed to last for years ended in months. The Andromedan command finally agreed to peace talks when their own troops refused to fight against Jake's forces. They had come to conquer a galaxy, but they found themselves facing a legend they could not defeat. Jake met with the Andromedan leaders on a neutral space station. They were tall, pale beings with silver skin and large black eyes. They moved with mechanical precision and spoke in emotionless voices. "We came to test the strength of this galaxy," the Andromedan commander said. "We expected to find weak species that we could easily conquer. Instead, we found humans." "And what did you learn about humans?" Jake asked. "We learned that humans are the most dangerous species in either galaxy," the commander replied. "Not because they are the strongest or the smartest, but because they fight for things that other species do not understand. They fight for honor. They fight for mercy. They fight for the right to save their enemies." Jake nodded. "And now? Now we wish to learn from you. We wish to understand this thing you call compassion. Our species has forgotten how to feel, how to care for others. We want you to teach us." Jake looked at the Andromedan commander, then at Admiral Vextar, who had been silent during the negotiations. Vextar nodded encouragingly. "I'll make you a deal," Jake said. "We'll teach you about compassion and mercy. In return, you share your medical knowledge with us. We work together to make the galaxy a better place for everyone." The Andromedan commander considered this for a long moment. "Acceptable, but we want you personally to oversee this exchange. We want to learn from the legend himself." And so Jake Morrison found himself with a new mission. The humans' revenge was expanded again, this time to include Andromedan medical technology and personnel. Jake's staff now included humans, dozens of alien species, and the emotionless but brilliant Andromedans. Jake stood in his expanded medical bay, watching human doctors work alongside Zephyrian healers and Andromedan technicians. Patients from 3 galaxies received treatment using knowledge that spanned the universe. Young medical students from every species came to study under Jake Morrison. They learned not just how to heal bodies, but how to heal the hatred between different peoples. They learned that the greatest strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when to fight and when to forgive. Admiral Vextar joined Jake at the observation window. "Do you ever regret it?" the alien asked. "Do you ever wish you had stayed a simple prison doctor instead of becoming a legend?" Jake thought about the question seriously. He remembered the scared, defeated man who had sat in chains on the transport to Titan VII. That man had wanted only to survive. But survival had not been enough. "No regrets," Jake said finally. "Someone had to show the galaxy that humans don't fight because we love war. We fight because we love peace enough to die for it. If I hadn't done it, someone else would have." "And now?" Jake smiled as he watched a young human student teaching an Andromedan how to show compassion to a patient. "Now we teach them that the greatest victory is not conquering your enemies, but turning them into friends." Jake Morrison had traveled a long path from prisoner to legend. He had proven that sometimes the most dangerous warriors were those who fought not to destroy but to preserve life itself. His story had become a lesson taught in schools across 3 galaxies, that true strength came not from the power to hurt, but from the courage to heal. The galaxy was safer because one human had refused to give up hope. The universe was better, because Jake Morrison had shown that even enemies could become allies when someone was brave enough to offer mercy instead of revenge. Dr. Jake Morrison, once a prisoner on a forgotten world, had become exactly what the galaxy needed: a healer who fought for life, a warrior who fought for peace, and a legend who fought for the idea that tomorrow could always be better than today.